Welcome, dear listener. Wherever you find yourself this evening, perhaps nestled beneath a soft blanket, your head gently resting on a pillow, or simply lying in the quiet comfort of a dim room, you are invited to take a journey. But this journey requires no suitcase, no passport, and no haste. Only your imagination. Tonight, we will drift together through time, gently tracing the long and winding history of maps. Maps are more than lines and symbols on parchment or paper. They are human dreams laid flat. They are windows into the way people once saw their world, what they valued, what they feared, what they misunderstood, and what they believed. They show not only where people lived, but how they lived, how they hoped, how they conquered and wandered and remembered. The art of cartography, as it's called, has evolved slowly and deliberately across millennia, etched into clay tablets, painted on animal skins, drawn with feather quills and ink, printed with presses, and finally, rendered digitally in pixels that glow quietly in your palm. And tonight, we will meander through this history together. We begin, as we often do here, by immersing ourselves in daily life, imagining the rhythms and routines of someone who might have lived long ago, before maps were things you folded or zoomed in and out of. Before maps were tools of science. When they were works of devotion, imagination, and occasionally, deception. So, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. And picture yourself walking barefoot on the packed earth of an ancient road, where the only guide is the memory of hills and the stars above. Let us begin. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I am super curious where you're all listening from. So, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Imagine yourself waking up in a place long ago. Not in a palace, nor aboard a ship bound for discovery, but in the quiet daily world of someone who never dreamed of conquest, who never charted an empire, yet lived each day moving through a world that had its own careful order. A farmer, perhaps. A weaver. A temple scribe. Let us begin, in ancient Mesopotamia. The sun is low on the horizon. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and baking clay. Somewhere in the distance, water flows gently through the irrigation canals that stretch like shallow veins across the land. It is early morning. Quiet. The world is only just beginning to stir. You step out onto the hard-packed ground outside your small home. The walls are built of sun-dried brick, warm and pale in the soft light. The narrow alleyways of your town are lined with similar homes, simple, low-roofed, cool inside despite the rising heat. Your path for the day is familiar. You know which stone to step over to avoid the water runoff. You know where the shade will fall by midday. You know that the baker's son will likely be sweeping the street corner as you pass. These are not places that need to be mapped in any formal way. They are felt. Lived. Woven into memory through repetition and rhythm. Still, in your heart, though you may never have held a stylus to clay, nor seen the curves of a continent drawn before you, you hold a map. Not one of the world, but of your world. A world measured not in miles or meridians, but in footsteps, in routines, in seasons. And yet, even here, in this soft, ancient quiet, there are those who draw the lines. In the temple storehouse, shaded from the heat of the afternoon, a scribe sits cross-legged on the ground. Before him, a fresh tablet of clay. He holds a stylus, sharpened reed, and dips its tip into water to keep it from cracking the surface. His eyes are focused, unhurried. He is preparing to draw a plan. Not a grand map of kingdoms or seas, but a layout, perhaps of a garden, or a canal, or a parcel of temple-owned farmland. These are practical, measured renderings. They are the first glimmers of spatial abstraction. The first hints of cartography. And they are deeply human. In Mesopotamia, such maps were used to track ownership, taxation, and construction. They recorded boundaries, harvest yields, and sometimes even astronomical alignments. One tablet, discovered near the ruins of Nippur, shows a map of a field, complete with its irrigation channels and a record of its yield, scratched carefully into clay nearly 4,000 years ago. These weren't made to impress. They were made to understand. To fix memory in something more lasting than recollection. Now, let us follow the slow curve of history, traveling westward along the fertile Nile. In ancient Egypt, life was similarly bound to place. The Nile, in its eternal rhythm, carved the land into two realities, Upper and Lower Egypt. Defined not by compass directions, but by the flow of water. Daily life here, too, was rhythmic. As the sun rose, farmers stepped onto fields softened by the recent inundation. Fishermen pushed their reed boats into the water, nets coiled at their feet. Children ran among date palms. And priests climbed temple stairs to tend to sacred rites, timed to the slow turning of stars overhead. Egyptians knew their land intimately. They knew how far to walk from the village to the first row of barley. They knew where the ibis nested in spring, and how long it took to row between bends in the river. Their understanding of space was empirical, learned by the body, the senses, the memory of seasons past. And yet, they also mapped. One of the oldest surviving topographical maps comes from Egypt, the Turin Papyrus map, drawn around 1150 BCE, during the reign of Ramesses IV. Unlike the abstract and often symbolic maps of other ancient cultures, this map is startlingly practical. It shows a wadi in the eastern desert, used in expeditions to quarry stone for temple building. The map details the paths, the geological features, the location of gold mines, all rendered with a surprisingly modern eye for terrain. Even the colors, black for mountains, pink for sandstone, and gray for gold-bearing quartz, suggest a level of cartographic awareness that quietly anticipates later developments. This wasn't a map for beauty. It was a tool. Yet in its precision lies a kind of beauty, too, a care for the land, for the journey, for the effort of translating reality into something that could be shared. In the background, meanwhile, another kind of map was unfolding, not on papyrus, but in the night sky. Egyptian priests observed the stars with deep reverence. The ceiling of the tomb of Senenmut, a royal architect under Hatshepsut, features an astronomical map, one of the oldest known star charts. It doesn't show Earth's geography, but rather the heavens' constellations, carefully plotted to track time and sacred ritual. For in Egypt, as in many ancient cultures, maps were not always of space. Sometimes, they were of time. The cycles of stars. The rise and fall of floods. The arc of the sun from east to west. Even here, even now, you can almost hear the soft footfalls of someone walking beside the river at dusk, looking upward, finding their place not on a grid, but among the stars. Now, we follow the sun as it sets in the west. And we arrive in ancient Greece. Here, cartography becomes something different again, philosophical, hypothetical, a question, rather than a record. The Greeks, especially from the 6th century BCE onward, began to ask deeper questions about the shape and size of the earth. Where the Egyptians and Mesopotamians charted the known, the Greeks began to speculate about the unknown. One figure stands quietly among them, Anaximander of Miletus. Around 610 BCE, Anaximander created what is believed to be one of the first true world maps, though it has not survived. His map, as described by later writers, showed the known lands, Europe, Asia, Libya, surrounded by a great encircling ocean. It was speculative, yes, but also ambitious. It was a worldview, flattened onto a page. Later, Eratosthenes, working in Alexandria around 240 BCE, would take these early ideas even further. He measured the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy, using little more than the angle of the sun's rays and a deep well in Syene. His work laid the groundwork for geography as a science. And yet, even then, maps were far from precise. Much of the world was unknown. The lands beyond India, the far north, the Western Ocean, all remained shrouded in mystery. The Greek geographer Strabo acknowledged this in his writings, noting that maps, like poems, must blend what is known with what is imagined. And so they did. Imagine a painted scroll, unrolling slowly before you. It shows the Aegean Sea, the shores of Asia Minor, the long stretch of the Nile. It also shows creatures of legend, giants, cyclopes, sea monsters that wait at the edges. Here, too, the boundaries of fact and fiction are soft. Maps were not only geographic. They were cultural artifacts, reflecting what a people valued, feared, revered. And in the daily life of an ancient Greek citizen, most maps were not seen at all. Knowledge of place came again through experience, through walking city streets, through sailing coastal waters, through the rhythm of markets, fields, festivals. Just as in Mesopotamia. Just as in Egypt. The common thread remains. Before maps became objects, they were lived experiences. Let us now rest briefly in ancient Rome, where maps found a new kind of utility. The Romans, master builders and administrators, valued maps not only for exploration but for control. They surveyed land for taxation. They mapped roads for military movement. They documented borders for legal ownership. The cadastral map became a bureaucratic necessity, marking who owned what, and where. These records were often engraved on bronze and stored in temples or public buildings. One of the most famous surviving Roman maps is the Tabula Peutingeriana, a long, scroll-like road map depicting the Cursus Publicus, or the imperial road network. It is not to scale. It distorts geography. But it shows, with great care, how to move through the empire. Towns, rest stops, distances, all laid out in a line. It is less a map than a journey in ink. Picture it, a traveler, perhaps a Roman merchant or soldier, unrolling this map by lamplight, tracing the path from Gaul to Rome to Carthage. He reads not landscapes, but intervals, days' walks, river crossings, places to eat or sleep. And in that moment, he understands his world. Not fully. Not perfectly. But enough to move forward. Just like us. Even now, in a time where maps are precise, digital, and instantly accessible, our deepest sense of place is still built on rhythm. On repetition. On memory. We know our homes not from satellites, but from lived experience. The feel of the doorknob. The sound of the gate. The way the light slants in through the window in late afternoon. And perhaps that is the oldest kind of map. The one you carry quietly. Unwritten. Unmeasured. But always known. So as you rest here, gently, after this slow immersion in the ancient world, picture yourself holding a map of your own life. Not of cities or borders, but of the places that comfort you. The paths you walk often. The corners of the world where you feel known. There is peace in that. And soon, we will move on, from this lived, grounded experience of mapping daily life, toward the journeys of individuals who changed the way the world itself was seen. Their stories lie just ahead, waiting. But for now, take a breath. Let the past settle softly around you. And allow the quiet cartographies of ancient lives to echo gently within your own. Now, let your thoughts drift quietly from the winding alleyways of ancient towns, from temples and tablet rooms, to the cool, damp air of a northern European village. The year is 1512. A child is born in the town of Ruppelmond, in what is now Belgium. His name is Gerard de Kramer, though the world will come to know him by another name, Gerardus Mercator. The world into which he arrives is in motion. The Renaissance is well underway. Great ships are sailing southward around Africa, westward across the Atlantic, probing distant shores. Empires are forming. Kingdoms are collapsing. Old maps are being unrolled, examined, and quietly discarded. Because they no longer fit the world as it is being seen. In this new era, the earth is not only round, it is enormous. And full of surprises. Islands that weren't there before. Continents that stretch far beyond imagination. Stars that shift subtly in unfamiliar skies. The world is becoming less mythical, and more measurable. But it needs a guide. And so, without knowing it yet, the boy Gerard, quiet, observant, curious, has been born into a task that will eventually reshape how humans understand space, distance, and direction. Gerard grows up among rivers and mists, in the green, uneven landscape of the Low Countries. His father dies when Gerard is still young. The family is modest, though not destitute. He is sent to live with his uncle, a priest, a man who sees promise in the boy's gentle demeanor and precise mind. By the time he is in his late teens, Gerard is studying at the University of Leuven. There, he is introduced to a world of numbers, angles, and languages. He is especially drawn to mathematics and astronomy, subjects that, in the 16th century, are deeply connected to the divine. To chart the stars is, in a sense, to read the thoughts of God. It is also here, at university, that Gerard Latineizes his name. De Kramer means merchant in Dutch. In Latin, Mercator. It is a name that, in time, will mark the very shape of the world. After his studies, Mercator begins work as an engraver and scientific instrument maker. This is delicate, meticulous labor. Imagine him, hunched over a brass astrolabe, his tools carefully aligned on a sunlit workbench. His fingers stained with ink and metal dust. His eye steady, almost motionless. He crafts globes. Armillary spheres. Compasses. Tools to guide the eyes of sailors and scholars alike. He works slowly. Thoughtfully. Always asking, how do we better understand space? But even as he builds the tools of navigation, Mercator knows they are not enough. The world needs better maps. At the time, most European maps are still awkward composites, part medieval art, part explorer's journal. Some are elegantly drawn, but misleading. Others are accurate along coastlines but empty inland. The farther a place is from the known, the more errors begin to creep in. More troubling for navigators is the fact that current maps are not geometrically consistent. They distort directions. If you sail a straight line using your compass, you may drift off course. The Earth is round, but maps are flat. And the conversion between the two is difficult. This is the cartographic challenge of Mercator's age. He is not the only one working on the problem. But he is perhaps the one who works most patiently, most persistently. And one day, after decades of study, he finds a solution. In the year 1569, Mercator publishes what will become his most famous, and most quietly revolutionary, work. It is a large, wall-sized map titled Nova et octa orbis terrae descriptio ad usum navigantium emendata commodata. A new and more complete representation of the terrestrial globe properly adapted for use in navigation. It is beautiful and practical. For the first time, this map shows the world in such a way that lines of constant compass direction, called rum lines, are straight. Sailors can now plot a straight path on the map and follow it with their compass at sea. They no longer need to constantly correct for the curvature of the Earth. Their journeys become more predictable, more confident. The trick behind this innovation is mathematical. Mercator has stretched the map vertically as you move away from the equator. This keeps angles consistent, at the cost of distorting size. So Greenland appears as large as Africa. Europe looms. The poles stretch endlessly. But in exchange, the sea becomes navigable. And that changes everything. You might think, with such an achievement, Mercator would become wealthy. Celebrated. But this was not a simple time. The 16th century is a period of religious upheaval, Protestant and Catholic tensions boiling over into war and suppression. Mercator, a deeply religious man but also an independent thinker, is suspected of heresy. In 1544, he is imprisoned for 7 months. He survives, but is shaken. Afterward, he moves to Duisburg, a quieter city, where he continues his work in relative peace. It is here that Mercator begins another ambitious project, a full cosmography, an atlas of the heavens and the earth. He publishes parts of it. Most notably, he revives and popularizes the term atlas to describe a bound collection of maps. It had been used before, but it is through Mercator's usage that the word becomes standard. He dedicates his atlas not just to geography, but to understanding the order of creation, to showing how all things fit together. In this way, even after his projection, Mercator continues to seek harmony between the mathematical and the divine. Mercator dies in 1594, in his 80s. His work is not yet fully recognized. His atlas is incomplete. But the seeds have been planted. In the centuries that follow, his projection will become the standard for nautical charts. It will be used in classrooms, on walls, in navigation systems. At times, it will also be criticized, for the way it distorts landmass sizes, subtly reinforcing Eurocentric perspectives. And yet, Mercator himself never meant for his map to define worldviews. He intended it as a tool. A compromise. A way to make one part of the world, the sea, more legible. But tools take on lives of their own. Even today, when you open a map app, the projection may still echo Mercator's vision, his carefully calculated grid, his stretching of space for the sake of consistency. And when you trace a route from one place to another, you are participating, gently, unknowingly, in a legacy that began at a workbench in a quiet room, with a compass, a stylus, and a mind that believed the world could be known. Now, let us return to the man behind the map. He is not a conqueror. Not a sailor. Not even a traveler, in the grand sense. Mercator lived a life of study, of careful lines and long thoughts. He wrote with slow precision. He measured patiently. He made mistakes, and corrected them. He did not rush. He did not shout. He listened, to the earth, to the heavens, to the mathematical harmonies that wove them together. And perhaps, this is why his legacy remains so enduring. Because even now, in an age of satellite imaging and real-time GPS, we still seek what he sought. A way to make sense of where we are. A way to move forward. A map, not just of land, but of meaning. So, as you rest here, in the gentle shadows of evening, let your thoughts settle. Imagine the soft scratching of a quill on paper. The scent of vellum. The slow, steady rhythm of a mind at work. And know that in some small, quiet way, your own life, your movements, your memories, your patterns, are forming a map, too. One not drawn in ink, but traced in time. Sleep well, traveler. The next part of your journey, into the mysteries and meanings behind maps, awaits. In every map, there is a silence. A blank space. A margin beyond which the known gives way to speculation. A place marked not with roads or rivers, but with question marks, and stories. Now, let your thoughts wander there. To the edges. To the forgotten maps, the sacred symbols, the whispered geometries that shaped how ancient cultures understood their place in a world they could not yet fully grasp. This is a segment about mystery. But not the thrilling kind. Rather, the slow, stirring kind. The kind that brushes gently against the edges of sleep, inviting your imagination to roam while your body remains still. Let's begin, far away in both time and geography. Let's begin, in Polynesia. You are on the deck of a canoe. It is night. The stars are overhead, steady and vast. The wind hums low in the sails. The waves do not rise high, but they are insistent, pushing softly, endlessly, with the rhythm of tides older than time itself. Beneath your feet, the canoe glides across open ocean. There are no signs. No compass. No charts in ink. And yet, you know the way. Because in the culture of the Marshall Islands, navigation is not recorded on parchment. It is remembered in wood and string. Taught by feel, not by formula. These are the stick charts. Constructed from thin coconut fronds and tiny shells, stick charts are physical representations of wave patterns, currents, and the relative positions of islands. Each line bends with intention, representing how swells travel across the open sea. Each shell marks a place in a vast watery web. To an outsider, these charts seem abstract, unreadable. But to a trained Polynesian navigator, they are stories. And more than that, they are a living geometry. one not fixed in ink, but in the motion of the sea itself. The stick chart was not carried on the journey. It was studied before the voyage began, absorbed into the body and mind. Then, it was left behind. In this way, the navigator becomes the map. His memory is tuned not only to stars, but to subtleties most cannot detect, the feel of a cross-current, the resonance of distant breakers, the rhythm of wind along the sail. It is a different kind of cartography, one rooted not in visual representation, but in embodied experience. And though many of these charts have been lost to time, a few remain, kept in quiet museums, their delicate lines whispering the echoes of journeys long past. Now, we shift. From oceans of water to oceans of thought. From islands of coral to temples of stone. Because some maps were never meant to guide the feet. They were meant to guide the soul. Let us now walk slowly into the cool interior of a sacred structure, perhaps a cathedral in medieval France, or a Hindu temple in Tamil Nadu. The stones are massive, weathered by centuries of reverence. Light filters in through narrow openings. You hear only the hush of wind outside, and the faint echo of your own breath. These spaces are maps, too. Not of physical distance, but of metaphysical order. Many ancient and medieval cultures believed that the structure of sacred buildings should reflect the structure of the universe. Every angle, every proportion, every direction held meaning. In the Western tradition, this belief found form in what is now called sacred geometry. The circle, symbol of eternity. The square, symbol of the earth. The triangle, reaching heavenward. In Gothic cathedrals, the floor plans often followed cruciform shapes, aligned with solstices and cardinal points. Proportions were carefully calculated using ratios believed to reflect divine harmony. To enter such a space was to step into a cosmic map, a symbolic rendering of the relationship between man, earth, and heaven. The Chartres Cathedral, for instance, contains a stone labyrinth carved into its floor. Pilgrims would walk this path slowly, meditatively, tracing a symbolic journey toward the divine. It was not a maze, but a mandala, a spatial prayer. Across the world, in different form, Buddhist mandalas also map out sacred space. They are not navigated by foot, but by thought. Mandalas represent a sacred universe in geometric symmetry, each quadrant, each lotus petal, reflecting the path to enlightenment. To meditate on a mandala is to journey inward, toward clarity. These are maps of the inner world. Quiet. Centered. Circular. And they remind us that not all maps point outward. Some are invitations to stillness. But what of the maps that no longer exist? What of the knowledge that was drawn, and then vanished? Let us pause now in Alexandria. The air here is warmer, scented with papyrus and salt. The sea shimmers quietly beyond the city walls. You find yourself walking along white marble corridors toward one of the most fabled institutions in human history, the Library of Alexandria. Founded in the 3rd century BCE, this vast center of learning may have housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Texts from Greece, Egypt, India, Persia. Records of law, medicine, poetry, and geography. We do not know exactly what maps were held there. But we can imagine. Perhaps there were scrolls showing the Nile's intricate branches. Perhaps sailors from the Red Sea contributed notes on distant coasts. Perhaps astronomers charted lunar cycles, aligning heaven with earth. And then, one day, or over many days, it was gone. war, fire, neglect. No single cause can be named with certainty. But the loss of the Library of Alexandria represents a deeper, quieter truth. Much of what we once knew is no longer known. Much of what was once mapped has been unmapped. There is melancholy in this, but also mystery. Because within every lost chart, there remains the possibility of rediscovery. And that, too, is a kind of map. From here, let us consider a different kind of cartography, one rooted not in sea or stone, but in story. In the Middle Ages, many European maps were drawn not for accuracy, but for meaning. The most famous of these are the Mappamundi, literally, maps of the world. But these were not maps as we know them. They were deeply symbolic, often circular, and oriented not with north at the top, but with east, the direction of Eden and sunrise. At the center of the map, Jerusalem. At the edges, marvels, monsters, and the unknown. You might find dog-headed men in India, or headless tribes in Africa, or dragons curling around distant coasts. These maps were not wrong in the traditional sense. They simply operated by different rules. They mapped a moral universe, one shaped by faith, myth, and theology. To look upon a Mappa Mundi was to see a world where geography and destiny were intertwined. Where the known lands merged with tales from scripture and legend. Where the periphery of the earth still shimmered with mystery. The Hereford Mappa Mundi, one of the largest to survive, is a perfect example. Drawn in the 13th century, it contains over 500 illustrations, including the Tower of Babel, the Garden of Eden, and scenes from Greek and Roman mythology. It was a map not meant to guide your steps, but your soul. Now, close your eyes again. You are walking not across parchment or stone, but across land itself, guided by stories. In many indigenous cultures, the map is not drawn. It is sung. Among Aboriginal Australian communities, the songlines, or dreaming tracks, form a vast oral geography. Each song tells the story of an ancestral being who walked the land, shaping rivers, hills, and sacred sites. To sing the song is to walk the path. It is memory made melodic. A navigation system preserved across centuries, without paper, without symbols. A living, breathing cartography of place. In the Arctic, Inuit hunters navigate snow-covered terrain using memory, observation, and carved ivory maps, small enough to fit in a hand, yet rich with meaning. These tactile tools represent coastlines, ice ridges, and animal paths. Again, the map is not merely an object. It is a relationship. Between human and environment. Between story and survival. And still, there remain places unmapped. Not because they are remote, but because they resist fixing. Because they are too large, too changing, or too sacred to be pinned down. The deep ocean. The inner mind. The future. In every era, there are edges where certainty fades into possibility. Maps can only take us so far. Beyond lies the unknown. And that unknown is an invitation to wonder, to dream, to rest. As you settle deeper into this quiet space, take a moment to breathe. Imagine the soft brush of coconut fronds in a Pacific breeze. The cool shadow of stone columns bathed in candlelight. The whisper of ancient scrolls turning in a forgotten library. All these traces, of maps lost, maps sacred, maps sung, form a gentle web. A reminder that the way we see the world is never fixed. That maps, in their quiet way, tell stories about what matters. Not just land or sea, but memory, faith, belief, and the slow, steady rhythm of human curiosity. So rest now, beneath these invisible skies of wonder. Let your mind drift with the currents of ancient knowledge. And prepare for the final journey, where the lives of the elite and everyday intertwine in the grand cartography of history. Now, as the evening deepens and your breathing slows, imagine yourself moving away from the vast mysteries of lost and sacred maps, and instead step into the ordered halls of power. Where maps were more than guides, they were tools of control. Where geography became geography of influence. Where lines on parchment translated into borders of kingdoms, domains of emperors, and blueprints of ambition. This final segment invites you to walk quietly through the subtle, intertwined worlds of social hierarchy, elite privilege, and the way maps shaped, and were shaped by, the forces of history. Imagine a large table covered in heavy velvet. On the table lies a map, not a simple navigational chart, but a finely crafted work, created by the royal cartographer's hand. It is colored with delicate pigments, gilded in places, and inscribed with Latin or the language of the court. This map is not for sailors. It is for kings. For rulers who wield power through borders drawn and redrawn. For nobles who claim lands because they appear on these sheets of parchment. Throughout history, maps have been symbols of authority. In medieval Europe, for example, kings commissioned maps not only to understand their domains, but to assert them, sometimes visually exaggerating boundaries, sometimes erasing rival claims by omission. These maps were often works of art, blending science with symbolism. In the great halls of palaces, they hung on walls like banners. A silent reminder of the reach and legitimacy of the sovereign. And the making of such maps was itself an elite craft, reserved for a handful of trusted geographers, often educated in royal courts or ecclesiastical schools. Now, let us drift slowly to the 15th and 16th centuries, a time when the world's geography was expanding rapidly, and so was the reach of European empires. As European powers sent ships across oceans, new lands appeared on maps, and with them, new claims. The Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, French, and English all sought to carve the globe into pieces they could govern and exploit. Maps became the blueprints of empire. In this era, maps were used in negotiations, treaties dividing oceans and continents. They appeared in legal documents defining who owned what. And they were used to justify conquest, colonization, and settlement. Take the Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494, for example. Spain and Portugal, two maritime powers, agreed on a line dividing the New World. But the exact location of the line depended on maps that were, at the time, imprecise. This blurry line on a map sparked centuries of dispute. Maps thus had real, lasting consequences, sometimes peaceful, often violent. Moving forward, imagine a governor's office in a colonial city somewhere in Asia or Africa. A large, folded map lies open on a desk, showing roads, settlements, rivers, and resource-rich areas. Maps were central to colonial administration, helping officials plan infrastructure, manage populations, and extract wealth. But maps also reflected colonial perspectives. Often, they downplayed or ignored the presence of indigenous peoples. Native settlements might be unnamed or misrepresented. Maps could erase histories and voices. This selective representation was a subtle form of power, shaping how land was understood and governed. The map, after all, was a lens through which the world was seen, and often reshaped. While kings and governors used maps as instruments of control, most people lived quite differently. Imagine now the life of a farmer in rural France or a fisher in a coastal village. For many, maps were not part of daily experience. Their maps were mental, formed through seasons, landmarks, stories passed down. A farmer's map might be the field boundaries marked by ancient trees or stone walls. A fisher's map might be the changing currents and tides remembered through generations. These maps were not drawn on parchment. They were drawn in memory, in habit. And yet, both the elite and the everyday were connected by geography. Because the boundaries drawn by rulers affected the rhythms of daily life. Taxes, duties, conscription, all depended on the invisible lines that only some could see on a map. As centuries passed, the production and use of maps gradually expanded. The Enlightenment brought new scientific methods to cartography. Surveys became more precise. Atlases more widely published. In the 18th and 19th centuries, maps began to appear in schools, in newspapers, in popular books. This democratization slowly shifted the relationship between maps and power. More people could learn to read maps. More people could imagine worlds beyond their village. Yet, maps remained complex tools, sometimes reinforcing power, sometimes challenging it. Finally, imagine yourself in the present day. Maps appear everywhere, on smartphones, cars, websites. Geographic information systems combine satellite data with real-time updates. Yet, the legacy of maps as tools of power remains. Borders continue to shape identities. Territorial disputes persist. And access to mapping technology itself is uneven, reflecting ongoing social and political dynamics. But now, with GPS and digital cartography, each of us carries a map in our pocket. We can trace our steps, explore new places, and even create our own maps. The act of mapping has become more personal, more participatory. As we conclude this long journey through the history and heart of maps, take a moment to reflect on the many layers we have visited. The daily lives of ordinary people, who navigated worlds known by experience and memory. The life of a man who gave us a new way to see the earth, combining science and soul. The mysteries and sacred geometries that remind us some maps point inward as much as outward. And the ways maps have been woven into power, privilege, and the shaping of societies. Maps are never neutral. They are mirrors. Reflecting what we know, and what we hope. What we control, and what we dream. They remind us that to navigate is not only to find a path through space, but through time, memory, and meaning. Now, as your body softens, your thoughts slowing, imagine unfolding a map, not to chart new lands, but to fold away this day. To fold away the past. To rest in the quiet certainty of your own place. And know that wherever you are part of a map still being drawn. And now, we have wandered through deserts and scrolls, temples and towers, We have followed the footsteps of Babylonian scribes and Renaissance mathematicians. We have stood beside emperors and merchants, villagers and voyagers. We have gazed at the heavens, and we have traced coastlines with fingers stained by ink. We have drifted across 1,000 years of mapmaking. And yet, even now, in the quiet dark of your room or wherever you may be listening, there is still movement. Still exploration. Still discovery. Because maps, in the end, are not just about space. They are about understanding. Understanding the contours of our surroundings. The reach of our aspirations. And the shape of our stories. Tonight, we've seen how early people navigated not by coordinates, but by memory and myth. How maps once told tales of gods and monsters, of paradise and peril. We've seen how Mercator's steady pen reshaped the known world, how he bent the globe into a tool, a grid for voyagers who would chase the horizon. We've visited maps painted on cathedral walls and carved into clay. We've followed the quiet resistance of oral geography and sacred song. We've witnessed the power of maps to conquer, and to connect. But now, you are still. No longer sailing the curved waters of an ancient sea. No longer walking the dirt roads of forgotten cities. You are here. In this moment. Anchored. And perhaps, that is the most important map of all. The one within you. The gentle compass that guides you back to yourself. To rest. To peace. No need to search for coordinates now. There are no borders to cross, no distances to measure. The world, for this moment, can be quiet. Folded like a well-used map. Edges soft with time. Laid to rest on the table of your thoughts. So let yourself drift. Let your breath be slow and easy. Let your eyes, if still open, grow heavy, like the lids of a book well read. And if sleep comes, let it come gently. Like the turning of a globe in a quiet room. Like a ship gliding across calm waters. Like a memory of home that no map can truly capture. Thank you for joining us, traveler. Until next time, may your dreams be well charted, and your journey, deeply restful. Good night.